So the nature of subordinate rights and third parties. So to reiterate from the previous video, in addition to restrictions imposed by law, an owner may choose to restrict his absolute right of use by the granting of subordinate real rights, such as leases, securities, servitudes, or by entering into some contractual agreement. So subordinate rights are used to provide third parties with shared or exclusive rights over land that they do not own. This allows third parties to benefit from non-ownership rights normally exclusively enjoyed by the owner of the cadastral unit. Subordinate rights describe nuanced rights relationship between the owner of the cadastral unit and this third party. This details the relationships between rights, responsibilities, and restrictions. So what are responsibilities as a party rights relationship? And this is the sharing of subordinate rights. So when formalized within a land register, a shared subordinate right over a cadastral unit is a responsibility for the party with the ownership right over the cadastral unit, i.e. the owner. They are encumbered by that responsibility to allow a third party who holds the subordinate right to benefit from that right. A key point here is that the party with the ownership right over the cadastral unit can still enjoy the right when it is shared. So how does that tie with restrictions in the same kind of party rights relationships? So exclusively sharing subordinate rights is a restriction. So when formalized within a land register, an exclusively shared subordinate right over a cadastral unit is a responsibility for the owning party in the same way as a responsibility as we just described, but it's also a restriction. So it's a restriction for the party with the ownership right over the cadastral unit, as it can no longer enjoy the benefit of that subordinate right. So key point here is that the party who has the ownership right over that cadastral unit can no longer enjoy it. So the difference between a restriction and responsibility is essentially one of exclusivity. So whilst a right of access can be shared by the owner of a cadastral unit with a third party, this has no impact on the owner's continued ability to enjoy the right that has been shared. The owner can still access their own title. When the owner of a cadastral unit does not have the ability to enjoy that right, then it becomes a restriction. So let's unpick these a little bit more. What's the relationship between benefits and encumbrances? So cadastral unit can be benefited or encumbered by subordinate rights, depending on whether the cadastral unit is either spatially affected by a right held by a third party. So the owned land then is encumbered by a right held by a third party, or if the cadastral unit acts as a party in a rights relationship, and it becomes a benefiting party, able to enjoy a right outwith of itself. And in that instance, you're describing a pertinent, which we described in an earlier video. So this is kind of how separate tenements are built up. So where a subordinate right that would normally be conferred through ownership is constrained, then this becomes a restriction. So likewise, this legal and conventional separate tenements are ownership restrictions against a principal land. The party who has the ownership right over the principal land can no longer enjoy the separated ownership right as it is owned by a third party. And so it's a different form of legal enshrinement of that restriction concept. So all of these previous scenarios in these videos can be inferred from different relationships between rights, parties, titles, and land. An ontology describing these relationships will provide a framework for automated inferencing. And this is where an ontology here is used as a first order logic representation of concepts. So, but having this in an automated framework will allow inferencing, and that will help streamline management as we can start to deal with automated logical inferencing of different rights scenarios as they come into the land register. Okay, that is the end of this section. Thank you.